Welcome, ladies and gents. Chris Andre here. You can find me at BetBoxing on Twitter for boxing related tweets, or you can subscribe to the channel. Click that notifications button and get a new notification whenever a new video is uploaded. Let's talk boxing. In fact, you know what? Before we talk boxing, I'm going to give you guys a little treat. Not that you lot deserve this sort of thing, but I don't know, man. You lot are my subscribers. I value you. So I'm going to give you a little tip, a little culinary tip, straight from the depths of the mind of Chris Andre, a wonderful creation. You got to trust me on this, right? It's a nice little coffee. Oh my word, it's a beautiful little coffee. Go and get yourself a massive mug, a big mug like this. Put in a couple of teaspoons of a good quality instant coffee. And I know what you're going to say, Chris, what are you banging on about? Instant coffee, the snobs out there. Trust me, there's a time and a place for instant coffee, right? Drop in after that a teaspoon of a good quality hot chocolate. Stick with me, trust me. I know you're thinking, all right, that's a mocha. Relax, chill. Drop in 2 cardamom seeds, 3 or 4 little barks of cinnamon, 3 or 4 cloves. Then go and get yourself, if you've got rose extract at home, maybe you're into your Middle Eastern cooking, great. If not, go and get, somebody messaged me, right? And they said to me, Chris, I know you love rose ice cream, rose milkshake, rose chocolates, you love rose. Well, Waitrose are doing a honey with rose extract. Waitrose, darling, very posh. So I decided I'm going to jump in the car, get down to Waitrose. The honey's on sale result. Get myself a honey, rose honey, drop in a teaspoon of that as well. You then pour in boiling hot water, a quarter of the way up to the cup, full of the cup. Just let it brew. Let it brew for an hour or two. You know how when I'm doing my mythological videos where mythology meets boxing, like the Hubris one, Fury Wilder 3, I tell you guys, sit back, relax, put on a brew and listen through. Well, this is the brew that you guys should be creating the next time you're listening to one of those videos. Wait for it to brew for an hour or two. Then after that, fill the rest of the cup up with 3/4 of the cup with boiling hot milk. It'll be frothy on top. Sprinkle on a little bit of cinnamon powder. Oh, Bob's your uncle. You're going to thank me in the morning. Now, let's talk boxing. I might have to start a culinary channel. Forget Gordon Ramsay, man. What does he know? Trust me, I've got some skills. I've got some skills. Let's talk boxing. Let's talk Tyson Fury. You know, I'm going to probably upload 2 separate videos because there's 2 topics I want to talk about. One of them is Fury, one of them is Alexander Usyk. The Fury one is regarding his status currently at the moment. There's been a lot of debate after comments he's made himself about, is he the best of this generation? Is he the greatest of this generation? Is he one of the best of all time? I've seen a lot of people say he is the greatest of all time. So I want to talk about the different schools of thought, which are quite extreme. There seems to be a real split here, and I've had some brilliant debates on this with people, wonderful people, on Hatman's Discord, on Twitter, on YouTube, on, you know, real life. So I want to talk about the different approaches to this, the different opinions, and I'll share mine as well. The other thing I want to talk about, which will probably come in another video so this one doesn't drag on, is Alexander Usyk and what I believe to be a gap between what he's actually doing and what Western boxing culture understands of what he's doing. I believe he's underappreciated by many fighters and pundits because there's a lack of understanding of what he's actually doing, which might seem surreal to say because I'm going to be talking about some of the top fighters in the world today. But I will give you a precedent to this happening in other sports as well. And then eventually there's a catch-up. But that'll be in a second video. With regards to this one, first and foremost, we have to start by saying this. There is a difference between the concept of the best of all time and the greatest of all time. The best is about ability and capability. How good are you as a fighter? If you were to clone all the top heavyweights of all time and put them in a ring together, not at the same time, this isn't a WWE Royal Rumble, right? But I mean in the league, the guy that would finish top of the league and win the most fights, you could crown as the best of all time. He may not have achieved as much as another fighter in that list, so he wouldn't be as great as him. The concept of the best is more subjective. Not that the concept of the greatest is not subjective also, because what you consider to be great can vary from man to man, right? So one fan might value how many weight categories you go through. Another fan might value the stretch of undefeated record, how dominant you were in a period. Another guy will value the depth of your CV, how many other top or legendary or Hall of Fame fighters did you beat, and so on and so forth. So there are different concepts of what equates to greatness, but it's still measurable to some extent. What I will say is this: Tyson Fury has referred to himself as the greatest of this generation. I personally believe that's very, very premature. He cannot say that. He may very well be the best of this generation. He may very well be the best of all time. In other words, if you were to have that league and they were all cloned at their best, it's possible. He's in the conversation of the guys that would win more fights than any other heavyweight. And I have been saying this before the Wilder fight. I was saying this before the Klitschko fight. And I'm going to rewind now to this to explain to you guys. And I bring this up quite often. And the reason I bring it up is because whenever you don't toe the line of a particular fighter, the hardcore fans of that fighter will refer to you as a hater. But when Tyson Fury was not rated by anyone really, and he was uppercutting himself in the face and he was being mocked that he was a nobody and that David Price would be the next superstar of the heavyweight division, I was saying he's going to overtake everyone. He's going to dethrone Vladimir Klitschko. So you can't then call me a hater because it suits me for him to become the dominant heavyweight of this era. So I can come out here and say, you see what Chris Andre does on his channel? He rewinds 10 years and he tells you, you know what? Wait and see. Tyson Fury is going to be the best. Like, he can see into the future. He's the Nostradamus of the boxing world. 10 years early, he tells you who's going to be the dominant force in the heavyweight division. That would suit me, right? But we are objective here. And I'm not going to toe a line just to try and make myself look good. We're being honest. It is impossible for Tyson Fury to be without doubt, beyond dispute, the greatest of this generation until he overcomes the other potential greats of this generation. Now, ideally, he would have to beat at least Usyk and Anthony Joshua. At least. However, he could conceivably, if Usyk was to beat AJ, again, he could then beat Usyk, never have to fight AJ, and say, look, I've proven myself now to be the top of the heap. Okay, I'm the king of the hill, as Frank Sinatra would say. But the thing is this. It would be a crying shame for boxing for him not to fight Anthony Joshua, right? It would be. It would be one of the greatest fights we never got to see. Even, you know, a bigger deal than not seeing, say, Bo and Lennox Lewis. It would be a bigger deal than that to me. It's a fight we have to see. But in terms of establishing himself as a status of the greatest, it would be clear that both Usyk and Fury rose to the top and then they faced off. And you had the guy that established himself as the greatest. Now, there are others I'd love to see Fury fight. Hrgovic, White, Makhmudov. I'd be here all day. Hunter. You know, there are a million fighters I'd love to see him fight. But realistically speaking, he's not going to go on to have another 10, 15 fights, I don't think. So you have to accept that realistically he would have established himself as the king of the era. This has nothing to do with capability. He may be the greatest of this era, and privately you might think, you know what, stylistically I reckon AJ would have beaten him. Hunter would have beaten him. Makhmudov would have beaten him. Whoever. But in terms of status, he would have proved himself to be the king of the hill. Until he overcomes that and becomes the best beyond dispute by beating the winner of AJ Usyk, there is that question mark. You cannot crown him as the best beyond dispute. He is currently the number one. If you're talking about rankings, you could argue him or Usyk. I would personally say Fury has had more of an established sort of superiority at heavyweight because he also beat Vladimir Klitschko before anyone beat him. Before anyone beat him in this era, I'm saying, Klitschko was 10 years unbeaten in his home country. Nobody gave Fury a hope in hell. So it's not like, you know, Vlad was past his best and washed up and over the hill. Fury took out a very good Vladimir Klitschko, despite the revised narrative that many come up with regards to Klitschko not, you know, having an off day or whatever. He was the Vladimir Klitschko. So Fury has to be ranked at number one and Usyk at number two. But to be the best beyond dispute, you have to beat the other guy who's the unified heavyweight champion, the cruiserweight undisputed champion, and is undefeated. But here's the thing. Even if he was to do that, so I've just basically explained why I don't agree with the very hardcore pro-Fury fans or Fury himself. But I also don't agree with the opposing argument, the people that say that's rubbish and they will always undermine Tyson Fury and indeed the boxers of the modern day. You have this narrative that the current heavyweight division is somehow weak. It's rubbish. This is a very strong heavyweight era. But what they tend to do is something that I call nostalgic bias, right? whereby they will look at fighters of the present day and they will say things like, how can Fury be a great fighter when he's not fought any great fighters? Who's he fought? And if you turn around and say, well, he beat Vladimir Klitschko, he beat Deontay Wilder, they'll say, yeah, well, Klitschko was the one good win, but there was no rematch. And then they'll say, Deontay Wilder's not proven. He was a paper champion. Who's he beaten? If you then turn around and say, what are you talking about? Wilder was knocking everybody out. But additionally to that, apart from his 41 knockout wins from his 42 victories, he beat some good fighters out there. But Main Stavern, he beat Luis Ortiz. These are good fighters. They will say to you, how are they good fighters? Who did they beat? Well, if I say to you, well, hold on a minute. Luis Ortiz beat guys like Bryant Jennings, who gave Klitschko a hard night. He beat Tony Thompson, who was a very good heavyweight in his day. Well, these aren't great fighters. No, they're not great fighters, but they're very good fighters. So if you're knocking out very good fighters, you are above very good. You are superb, right? So they will then turn around, a lot of them, and say, nah, they're not very good fighters. In another era, they wouldn't have been top fighters. Well, now you're just perpetuating this concept of them not being able to prove themselves. Because what you're saying is Fury, AJ, Wilder, Usyk, whoever it is, they can't be great fighters until they beat someone of value. Well, when they do beat someone of value from their era, you say, but the era's weak. Well, it's not weak. That's your word against mine, but I promise you it's not weak. But even if you think it's weak, in other words, you're not actually saying they can't be great until they've beaten the top guys. What you're actually saying is, I will never accept them being great. Because whatever happens, you're going to undermine their achievements, right? So there is, in my opinion, a bias on both sides. There is a nostalgic bias, this concept of, you know, the guys of the past were much better and the heavyweight division was stronger. One thing I always ask people is, they talk about Deontay Wilder like he's a nothing, he's a nobody. Mike Tyson, who was definitely a great heavyweight, who did Mike Tyson beat? Not who did he fight, who did he beat? That is definitely better than Deontay Wilder. He beat Spinks, who was a light heavyweight, essentially went up, very talented fighter, but not a heavyweight. He beat Larry Holmes, who was completely washed up. You can't give Larry Holmes the credit for beating Muhammad Ali because Muhammad Ali was a shadow of his former self. By the same token, you can't say Mike Tyson beat the Larry Holmes. He'd been retired, he came out of retirement, he had short notice to prepare, he wasn't in great condition. If that Larry Holmes stepped in the ring with Deontay Wilder, his head would end up in row Z. You're not comparing the two fighters, right? At the point he fought them. Tucker was a good fighter. Roddick was a good fighter. Are they better than Deontay Wilder? I doubt it. The answer is no, in my humble opinion. They would lose to him, in my humble opinion. But the point is, this idea that, you know, these greats of the past smash the greats of today is just rubbish. But what happens is when you put these guys on a pedestal, this concept of they were superheroes in the past and the guys of today don't really know what they're doing, what happens is whatever they go on to achieve, you will undermine them. In other words, you're creating a scenario where they cannot prove their level. Do you see what I'm saying? So in summary, Tyson Fury, in my humble opinion, is definitely one of the best of all time. Possibly the best, although you can't make that comment. Because for me, when you're talking about the best of all time, just in ability, it's so subjective that you just have a group of guys. You have a handful of guys, a selection of guys, and you say it could be any one of these guys. You know, would Tyson Fury beat Joe Frazier? I think so. Would he beat George Foreman? I think so. But you might say to me, no, I don't think he does. Well, you know, how do we prove it either way? So what happens is it just becomes a back and forth debate. So what I do is look at a bunch of guys and say, right, these guys are in the conversation of being the best. These are the ones that go into that conversation. And from then on, make your case. But when you're talking about the greatest, then you are talking about established legacy. You are talking about achievement. You are talking about the sort of things that Muhammad Ali did, whereby he wasn't given a hope in some fights and he still found a way through. Now, when he gets the better of Joe Frazier, for instance, in their trilogy, many people felt that, look, the fight of the century, so to speak, when they were both undefeated and the closest to their primes, Muhammad Ali actually lost. He went on to win the subsequent fights. The second one was a comfortable points win where Ali just, you know, was able to be in control. The third one was an absolute war, whereby if the rumours are to be true from people that were in Ali's corner at the time, Ali was about to be pulled out. He asked for his gloves to be cut off. And Angelo Dundee did not immediately respond. He sort of ignored him. And by the time the conversation happened again, Eddie Futch, Joe Frazier's trainer, pulled him out, wouldn't let him go back out. So the point is, a few more seconds and it could have been Ali pulling out of that fight. But we don't know that for sure. The fact of the matter is he overcame Joe Frazier in an absolute barn burner of a fight. He then fought... he went on towards the end of his career to fight fights where he was just in terrible shape. And you can't hold that against his legacy. But take George Foreman. He wasn't given a hope in hell back then either. And he found a way. And that thing of overcoming when you're not given a hope, that adds to your mythology. It adds to your legacy. It adds when nobody gave him a hope against Sonny Liston. He did it. These things build your mythology. They build your status. So if you're talking about the greatest... No, Tyson Fury has not established himself as the greatest. You have to be Lennox Lewis, whereby you overcome everyone in your era and you are the best beyond dispute before you can say I'm the greatest of this era, let alone the greatest of all time. That's my take on it. Let me know what you think. I'm about to record another video which I will upload in about 12 hours from now regarding Alexander Usyk. So let me know what you think, guys. Thanks for watching. What's your opinion on all this? Are you someone that never believes the winner of this era will be able to establish themselves? It's a crying shame in my opinion too, because when Usyk was going to fight AJ, not many people gave him a hope. I did explain that I felt that a lot of people would feel that Usyk won the fight, particularly those that are admirers of Usyk, and I myself am an admirer of his style. But I felt that AJ would be given the decision. He'd be gifted the decision. That wasn't the case in the end, because he won even wider than I expected him to win. In that point, instead of people saying, wow, man, Usyk's a special fighter, many people saw it as, well, AJ ain't all that. So do you see what I'm talking about? This self-perpetuating myth about whatever a modern day guy does, he's going to be undermined because there's this lens that the old timers are observed through. Let me know what your opinion is. Thanks for watching, everyone. Take care. Chat to you soon, and God bless.